The tools that we're gonna need today: your ruler, your whatever sharp cutting tools, X-Acto knives, all of that kind of thing. Forgot to get my X-Acto knife anyway. Your drawing utensil. Some of my altered shapes were just taking like a regular circle and just cutting a shape out of it. So we have like our square that I already cut something out of. This was just an irregular, this we need. This was just like a really simple, like, rectangle with an extra rectangle at the end. So these all seem really kind of basic, and you're like, well, how, these aren't that interesting, but they're gonna become interesting. So the idea is working with simple concepts to create a more complex form. Did make some smaller circles. These are smaller than my hand. And so you might want to start making some smaller shapes. Here's a square with a square cut out. Obviously you could have made cut a circle out of that. I'll talk a little bit about how I created this shape. I kind of went over it yesterday. Just lots of triangles. Triangles are really nice because when you put them together in different ways, they start to create like a dynamic kind of movement. The sharpness, and they're sharp and directional, so they can create really nice direction and movement in your sculpture. So shapes do have movement, or they can show movement. So like a triangle can be like a sharp, directional, crossing over, pointing. They can be fast, meaning like they're pointing to something really specifically and directly, so even if they're not really pointing to anything, it's the idea. So it's like an arrow. So depending on how you use it in your sculpture, it's going to have a different feel to it. And then shapes like this, these altered shapes, have similar feels to what the original shape was. It just starts to break that down and give you that sort of, your brain starts to want to put the parts back in there. So it starts to slow down how you're seeing something. Here, this was just another kind of debris. It was a piece of the paper I cut out these shapes from, and then I just altered it. It's a smaller rectangle. So I didn't talk about making smaller shapes, but for moving forward, you want to think about making some altered shapes. I kind of liked this. This was a piece of paper that I cut a shape out of. And I liked this as a shape. So I'm going to keep this as one of my shapes. Using these when we work in clay, we might be continuing to use these as templates. So I have another triangle here. Really easily I can alter this without having to draw on it. So you could, without having to draw altered shapes, you could kind of play with the form. Right, so now I'm starting to get another shape here. Okay, and I'll cut that out quickly. And then if I cut into it and I can make these like these kind of, this like frill type of thing. Okay. So make a rectangle, super easy thing to do if your paper is still straight. But you can, and depending on the kind of material you use, you can really play with So, sorry, I'm cutting these in strips, but leaving it attached to. Okay. So this material really doesn't do much. It doesn't have any hold to it, but if you could roll that, and then you can start to create spirals. And spirals are really, really dynamic forms. They're kind of about, continuing movement, so that can start to become an interesting form. And then maybe once you do that, and maybe you're like, oh, what if I then cut, and then I have this thing that maybe has some unwieldiness. So this we really won't use as a template because it doesn't work as a template. This is just more as a experimentation. So some of these pieces of paper won't really hold up as templates, but they will hold up as placements, bookmarks for ideas that you can then use in when you're cutting out your cardboard or your other types of materials. Symmetrical shapes that are kind of organic symmetrical shapes. I'm just doodling here. You might spend a little bit more time thinking about that if you want to, or you can also just play a little bit. I like to, when I'm doing stuff like this, I like to sort of give myself some playroom to see what happens. So I'm sorry, I didn't mention, but what I'm using right now is a folded piece of paper. So I'm cutting out I drew on the fold side of the paper. Okay. And now I have this weird form. But, if I don't like what's going on in this form, you can go back in and cut something else out of it. So if I wanted to change something just to see what would happen. Okay. Now I have this it's a little more interesting to me. Okay. A lot of these shapes that I've made, come from just kind of doodling on a folded piece of paper and cutting out from the fold. So I have a bunch of these shapes that are just coming from a fold. Okay. So you're going to want to spend some time. You can use elements of ornament that you find. So elements from pattern. So how do you find elements of pattern? Well, I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of things around you that have pattern on it. Like I have this towel that has like a really kind of basic pattern on it. How do you transfer that? So one thing you could do is just think, sometimes I freehand patterns that I see so that they actually look a little bit different than what is on the pattern itself. So it gives it a little bit of nuance. So what I'm going to do here is just look at the silhouette, the profile of that pattern, and just try to copy it visually. And different things will happen because I'm not tracing it. And then it goes down like that. Okay. That. Okay, so yeah, it looks really different from, let's see. It looks really different from the pattern on the towel. Yeah. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to sort of see that. So what if you want it to be exactly like the pattern on the towel? Remember, if you're using Sharpie, it might transfer through. So And then you could use this to trace, once you've cut this out, you can trace this onto your cardboard, or even just use it as an element itself. Remember, if you want to make multiples of these, you could just put multiple pieces of tissue, of paper, whatever paper you're using, and make like more than one. It gives you the idea of the form. I do like to make, some forms that look like things in nature, things in ornament or nature. So that I usually freehand, but if you have, you can use books and stuff like that. So this was not done on a fold. This was just basically freehanded out of the paper. So yeah, I just basically, I wanted something with a little bit of curve, to sort of this idea of kind of directional curves. And maybe alter that a little bit. I don't like that actually, so let's just make that a continuous. So you could cut that out and you'd have something like that. So I'm creating some of your altered shapes using so you see I drew half a circle there. Then I'm going to place this, so I'm going to place this over here and just draw in, and then place it out. So you're drawing on the outside circle there. And then, depending on where you put that next circle, you'll get, this kind of shape right here. So you could play with how these templates work. So sometimes where I'm not sure where I want to go, I might freehand that section. So this part we're not going to use. I also do like to just freehand shapes. So this is a book of ornament. You can use some of these shapes. Just stay away from things that look obviously like a flower. So this kind of shape, unless you're going to alter it in some way, is going to look a little bit too much like a flower. Even something like this, I think when you trace it in paper, now I'm going to use a pencil for this. I don't want to get a mark on my book because I'm not going to trace all the details of that leaf shape, and I might alter some of this a little bit. All right, we're going to stop there. Let's go a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm just going to jag over a little bit and just make a straight line instead of adding all those extra things. And then I have a shape that maybe references plant life but is a more abstract shape. Okay, and then cut that out and either use it on this paper or trace it onto another piece of harder paper or cardboard or something like that. Let's aim for 15 irregular shapes. You can always make more of those. You also, if I cut this out better, or I can also use this negative shape. So this is a shape now. At this point, you can make larger and smaller shapes, or even just as an element that's just hanging, like dangling in your sculpture. And we're gonna go on to cutting out of cardboard and that kind of thing.